alternator failure right as I enter IMC is something I have to deal with right now.
You wouldn't want to find yourself in this situation without having prepared beforehand on the ground. When departing in low IFR, airlines use takeoff alternates. When we look at the regulations for airline operations in the United States, it says in so many words, no person may dispatch or release an aircraft from that airport unless the dispatch or flight release specifies an alternate airport. When we look at the charter regulations in the United States, they say in so many words, no person may take off an aircraft under IFR unless there is an alternate airport. So look folks, if it's good enough for the pros, it's certainly good enough for us. So let's paint the picture for you. Here we are at Van Nuys Airport in Los Angeles, California, and we're going to fly the Newall 6 departure Daggett transition. The airport directly to the east of Van Nuys is Burbank. And one of the great beautiful things about the Burbank airport is it's got this beautiful ILS localizer that goes right over the departure end of runways 16 at Van Nuys. So that being said, we're going to use the ILS to runway 8 at Burbank as our takeoff alternate for our departure at Van Nuys. So that leads us to our first technique, which is we're going to load the takeoff alternate directly into the active flight plan. Here's the multifunction display, and what I want you to see is we've got a flight plan here that goes from Van Nuys to Albuquerque's Double Eagle. Let's zoom in on the flight plan. I'm going to turn the cursor on. You can see here in the flight plan we've got the Newall 6 departure loaded up. Here's the en route waypoints. We're going to take Victor 12 to Zuni. And then at Zuni, we're going to pick up the Levan 3 arrival Zuni transition. But note at the bottom of the flight plan, there's no approach loaded. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually use the procedure button, hit select approach to load the takeoff alternate. So notice it gives me the approaches here at Double Eagle. I'm going to push the clear button. Sometimes people will call that the cancel button. I'm going to scroll up to the top. And I'm going to change the name of the airport from Double Eagle, which is K-A-E-G, to Burbank, K-B-U-R, because remember, Burbank is my takeoff alternate. Now that I have Burbank entered in, I'll press the enter button. I'll choose the approach, the ILS to runway 8. I'll choose vectors as the transition. And then I'm simply just going to scroll on down to load. I'll press enter. I'll acknowledge the advisory message. And now, before I scroll on through the flight plan, just to abbreviate it, I'm going to push menu. I'm just going to collapse the airways. Now I'm going to scroll on through the flight plan. Notice it changed the name of the flight plan at the top from KVNY to KBUR, but that's all right. It's the same flight plan. Look, there's the Levan 3 arrival, Zuni transition. And notice at the bottom, there's my takeoff alternate at the end of the active flight plan. So now, let's fly the actual Newall 6 departure using this technique. I'm just going to speed it up for training purposes here. And you can see as the airplane starts its turn and gets established on the heading of 110, I get presented with a dual electrical failure. So as I get presented with the dual electrical failure, I make my decision to immediately proceed to my takeoff alternate. I declare an emergency with air traffic control and advise them I want to proceed into Burbank via the ILS to runway 8. All I simply have to do is hit procedure, activate the flight plan or activate vectors to final, and as we jump ahead, you can see here, I've been able to successfully load the takeoff alternate into my active flight plan. Now, that leads us to pro tip number 2, which is we're going to load the takeoff alternate into flight plan 2. So in this case here, we'll look at a multifunction display. I'm on the ground at Van Nuys. I'm going to push the flight plan button. And what I'm going to do is use the changer knob, the small knob, to go over to my flight plan catalog. And you can see here in my flight plan catalog, as I turn the cursor on, that flight plan 2 is blank for now, but notice that flight plans 3 and 4 are labeled alternate 1 and 2. Those are my en route alternates, but we're actually going to modify flight plan 2. So I'm going to press enter to go into it. And now let me ask you a question. what button would you press to load the takeoff alternate into Flight Plan 2? It's not the procedure button. That's the common error that everybody makes. What you actually do is you press the soft key at the bottom, load approach. So we push the load approach soft key. We enter the name of the airport for the takeoff alternate, KBUR. We choose the approach that we want. ILS runway 8, we'll choose the transition. And notice at the bottom here, it says load only. There's no activate here. Well, that's what we want, so we're going to be able to load the approach into Flight Plan 2. And then what I like to do is I actually like to come up and notice the name of the flight plan up there is 02 Tokes KBUR. I'll actually come on in, and I'll just speed this up. I'm going to change the label of the flight plan to Takeoff Alternate. That way, when I actually dump out of the Flight Plan 2 and I look at my flight plan catalog, I can actually see the label of my different flight plans. You can see there's Flight Plan 1, KVNY to KAEG. Then I've got my takeoff alternate, and then my 2 en route alternates if I need them. Now let's fly the new all-6 departure using this technique. So here we are getting airborne on the new all-6 departure, the Daggett transition, and I'm just going to speed this up for training purposes. And again, I get introduced with the same electrical failure. I have a dual electrical failure. I declare the emergency with ATC, and I tell them I now want to proceed to Burbank, which is my takeoff alternate. In this case, all I have to do is go to the multifunction display, select the flight plan catalog, highlight the takeoff alternate, and I'm going to use the soft key at the bottom, active. Activate the stored flight plan. I'll press enter, and now I've got my takeoff alternate loaded directly into the active flight plan. ATC starts to give me radar vectors to get me established onto the ILS runway 8 final approach course. And that's going to raise a caution flag. The caution flag is, if you're having to proceed to your takeoff alternate, you need to make sure that you confirm the nav frequency and course if required. You can see up here, I'm checking to make sure that I've got the correct localizer frequency, 109.5 IBUR, and then I'm making sure that my CDI is set to Loc 1 and it's got the correct course. Pro tip number 1 is, you can use the technique of loading your takeoff alternate directly into the active flight plan. Pro tip number 2 is, you can also use the technique of loading the takeoff alternate into Flight Plan 2.
A takeoff alternate seems like a lot of work, but in the end, a little bit of planning and some preparation will go a long way towards being prepared.